Here we are, face to face, just a couple of silver spoons. Remember that fucking show? Oh my god, long time ago. Speaking of a long time ago, it's been a while since I've used this software because it fucked up and I uninstalled it. But I managed to fix it and get it working again. And it works beautiful. And what is this software, you ask? What the fuck am I using? Studio One. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. I love Harrison Mix Bus. I love FL Studio, which I make beats in FL Studio. I still make beats there. Matter of fact, this beat was made in FL Studio. And I use some loops or whatever. I just made something quick so we'd have something for me to mix because I've probably mixed everything already and put it on my YouTube channel already. So, so I'm just showing you my music, but I'm also showing you Studio One, and I'm showing you something different now because these tracks are all digital, right? But one thing I'm gonna tell you right now with Studio One is I don't know how the fuck they do it, okay? But this bad boy right here, I don't know how they do it, but it sounds, my mixes sound like analog when I use this. And I'm not kidding. Like, dude, like, I know Harrison watches this. Like, you guys need to figure out what they're doing here. Put it in your workstation because it's similar to what you guys do, but it's a bit better. Let me tell you why it's better. So, I mean, for now, this is the ultimate mixing DAW. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Harrison Mix Bus. I do. But this workflow really, really is pretty awesome. And I'm going to show you why I personally like it. This was my favorite. You guys watch a bunch of older videos of mine or whatever. I was using Studio One, and then I updated it and crashed the thing, and it did not work for a while. And then it occurred to me, revert to before the update. Took me only like a year to do that. Is what it is, because I was disappointed. I got mad. I uninstalled it, and then I stuck to either Harrison Mix Bus or just mixing in FL Studio for like the last year. But then it was like, wait a second, just go put it back to the version that you had before the update, and then it'll work perfect like it was before. And it does. Yay. Computers, man, you know how they are. Well, anyway, I love this. I love having Brit console. This thing, it's created by State Space. I guess it's a part of Studio One's infrastructure. And it's similar in the fact that on Harrison Mix Bus, they needed the whole DAW to give you the sound. And in this case, Brit console is doing that. Except that we don't just get one console, guys. So hey, there's an idea for SSL Mix Bus. We're not just getting one console. I'm getting a ton of consoles, right? And all of them, of course, related to an SSL console. So in this case, the Brit console is this one is called G style, so it's got the characteristics of an SSL 4000G. How do we know this? Vintage is 4000, super analog 9000, modern with variable harmonic distortion, that tells you duality, right? So the modern is duality, super is 9000, vintage is 4000. Harmonics are set, these are not even engaged here. I don't even think you can't even engage them on this because there's already harmonics and it's set to whatever vintage was. So it's going to sound like a 4000. So now you have the character button and it goes from 1 to 10. That means how many times are you running audio through this console? If you set it to 1, then it's 1 time through the console. If it's 2.5, 2.5 times through the console, 10 times through the console. Why in the world would you do that? Well, go watch some old videos. Go watch Bone Thugs. After this video, go look up something from like Bone Thugs and Harmony when they were in the studio back in the 90s. And watch their studio sessions. And it'll all become clear to you how it works. They record, right, through the same console they're going to mix. So you're not getting the character, but they had to record the tape. So you're not getting just the characteristic of the console once on the mix. They are mic'd up and they're recording through the SSL 4000G console. Then it goes to tape machine, and then they mix on that same console. So you know when they're recording to the tape, that sound is baked into the tape. So now the SSL 4000 harmonics and whatever crosstalk and other stuff going on, noise and all this stuff, is going into the tape. Then when they go mix, well, that's the second time you're getting the console's harmonics, crosstalk, drive, you name it, going into the master tape. So we can emulate that without having to do two different sessions. In this case, I can set the character, which I have it set here, to, you can see on the top left side of the screen. It's at 2.02. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but basically it's 2 times the character of the console. So that means it's recording into the console, and then we're mixing through the console going into master tape. Now there is tape on the track. I put tapes on the tracks because we want the tape on there too, the tape saturation, because it's recording the tape. In this case, I have Slate Virtual Tape Machine, and I'm using Ampex 456 tape set to 15 IPS. I think that's inches per second. Or you can just call them IPS. I've heard that too. 456 tape, 15 IPS, 2-inch 16 track. That's the character of the tape. That is a Studer A827. So we're on the A827. That is a tracking tape machine because it's 2 inches. Master tape is skinnier. It's 1/2 inch, and it has its own character. You can use the same tape, but well, actually, it's not the same. It's the same type of tape. But let's say if we go 456 to 1/2 inch 2 track, well, it's not going to be 456 2 inches, 456 1/2 inch tape. Now they have that too, by the way. It exists, and I like the sound of 456 tape because it sounds like the tape machine on mixanalog.com. Not exactly, but like 99%. Sounds very good. I leave it on normal bias, by the way, and I'm treated like a real tape machine. You don't want to go in the red because back then you did not really want the distortion, but you want the warmth. But they weren't doing it for warmth. They had to record the tape. They didn't have a choice. They didn't have any other choice but to record the tape. But over time, we go, tape sounds good. So we're going to work on tape. This is a boom bap beat, by the way. So a lot of this stuff already has Analog Mojo on it. But so did it. So did that and back in the day, right? It had the Analog Mojo back in the day because they got it from records. They got it from... then they went through like a sampler, like a 12-bit sampler of some kind, MPC 60, SP 1200, whatever. And that character, they didn't have a choice. They still had to record into the console, into the tape machine. It is what it is. But we're also going to mix. So we're going to get the best of both worlds. We're also going to mix. Since I'm setting up an SSL 4000G on this one, because I like that sound. I do like the sound of the E, like when I was in FL Studio and stuff, because FL Studio did not have Brit console, right? So it did not have the ability to warm up these tracks any more than it already did. But Brit console, for some reason, also does more, right? It's crosstalk, there's noise, there's gated noise, so is here, but whatever. A little extra ain't gonna hurt. Makes it sound more real. And then, these are all very subtle anyway. And then... There's drive. There's a little bit of drive, which means it's the harmonics of the console. So, I mean, I'm not driving anything, but they also, for some reason, gain stage everything, like automatically with this. At least that's what it seems like, because I notice like the tracks are lower here than they are when I export them, which is a good thing. It means they're gain staged. So I don't have to worry about that, about like distorted, horrible, nasty tracks mixing into my plugins. So I use the Brainworks plugin. You could get away with the waves and it'll still sound like legit. It's because most of the characters coming from Brit console. Most of the characters are really coming from this, more so than this. The reason why I'm using this though is the workflow is easy, and not to mention it sounds accurate. I watched a video about it, and then you do get channel tolerances. Here, you don't have channel tolerances, but you do have everything else. I don't know if channel tolerances they don't matter that much, but they kind of do if you're really trying to recreate the console sound in the box, and you're trying to fool people and go, haha, analog, right? They can't tell the difference, and they probably wouldn't, the way that this sounds. This sounds pretty damn analog. Like, I'm really, really surprised. And you're basically getting a full console, replication this way. So we have our crosstalk. I just use this preset G style. So I'm wondering if you guys can see this shit. Yes, you can. Okay, I'm just making sure, man, because OBS Studio be fucking up at times. But anyway, I just use this because it's set to mimic the sound of a G series console. Perfect, right? I got no problems with that. And then I have a Waves SSL G-Bus compressor because it's the G-Bus compressor, not a Townhouse bus compressor. But you can use a Townhouse bus compressor, but I prefer to use... Do I like this company? Fuck no. I can't stand this company. I hate the way that they do business, but I'm not going to hate on their... Well, I do hate on their plugins too, but I don't hate this plugin. This is the G-Bus compressor. It's dope, right? It's a good bus compressor. Is it accurate exactly to the G-Bus compressor? I don't fucking know. And so what, right? It's probably accurate to the one they modeled, which probably doesn't sound like any G-Bus compressor anybody's ever heard, right? I don't know, but it does the job, and it's modeled after a G-series bus compressor, right? Which would be on the master bus. So we're going to use that, and we're going to go into the tape machine once again, but this time we're on 1/2" 2-track tape. So now we are on the master tape, 30 IPS, Ampex 456. Excuse me. So another thing that I like about this, automation is a breeze in here. I'm not going to need to automate anything on my vocals, but nevertheless, automation is a breeze in here. I also like the fact that I can flip through tracks here on the left side, because sometimes they're in order, especially if you've got somebody who's really took their time to make sure that their tracks are labeled properly. Then I can go, oh, kick, snare, and just flip through it that way. This I like. Everything's color-coded already. I don't have to set the colors like I did before. Remember when I was doing that in FL Studio, having to set my colors? I don't have to do that here. And you have other cool shit, like for instance, if I wanted my groups, right? Its little icon looks like 3 little dudes over here. You can show your groups, and you can make your groups. You see your groups right there. Dope. Instruments, not so important to me, but it's there. If you were recording and doing instruments in here, I have all my shit right here. I have everything grouped really nice by plugin manufacturer. Makes it very easy to find my plugins. Fire, right? I mean, you really can't beat this system to me. And then I got Reaper. It's like Reaper and FL Studio had a baby, and then the sound of a fucking SSL console. Dude, I have it all. I have it all, baby. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still eager for SSL mix bus, but I don't need it. Shit, I already have my SSL mix bus right here, and it sounds like a fucking classic SSL 4000. Fire, man. Absolute fire. Alright, so you guys want to keep listening to me talk up Studio One? You guys know what I feel about Studio One. This to me is everything. Pro Tools is trash, right? And everything else is better than Pro Tools. But this is better than even the best shit that's out there. And like I said, I really like Harrison Mix Bus, but the Harrison sound is kind of not for everything, right? So most of the time I want SSL vibe on the music that I'm doing, and I don't want 9000 vibe. That's just clean and brittle shit. That's almost digital. If you're gonna mix digital, you don't really need that. I don't know. I mean, it's not. I know clean analog versus clean digital is not the same, but let's be honest here. I don't think that they're gonna make it sound very analog. They're just going to give you really cool digital tools, and you're going to get a digital mix, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be very clean per se, but harsh too, right? So you got ways to tame harshness, but for me, I'm chasing a vibe. That's what it is, this vibe. I like this vibe. This vibe reminds me of East 1999. You know, this vibe reminds me of Thuggish Ruggish Bone. That's the vibe I'm going for. Although this beat is not a Thuggish Ruggish Bone beat by far, I just like the sound quality of that music. So go listen to that. Let's go look for like an HD version, and not like some dude who like tried to master it on his own and said, now this is the HD version. But I meant like, go find one, like you have to go to like Bone Thugs or whatever, go type in the name of their album, and it says play album on the right side on YouTube. Well, that's going to give you the actual album uploaded by the actual artist, which will probably have the right sound quality, and then you can listen to it in quote unquote HD, so that you have the highest sound quality, and then you can compare notes. Don't compare notes to some dude who just uploaded it, whatever, and didn't encode things correctly, or decided, hey, I think I can make a better master, and they took it, ran it through Ozone, and boosted all the highs on it, and it goes, this is the HD version, and you have all this ear-piercing treble. No. Or they made it insanely loud and distorted. HD version, you know. You mean high def, and I don't mean like deaf as in definition, but deaf as you're gonna go highly deaf from listening to this loud ass shit. Yeah, it's the high def version. Anyway, fuck all that talking, man. Let's get into the mix. Studio 1.5. I know they have 6, but I'm on 5. I'm on 5, and I'm on Studio 1.5 Pro. And I know they have 6, but I don't need it. This is everything I need. So there, boom. Let's go. Let me mute my mic and shit. Okay. Did you hear how nice that turned out and how quick that was? So let me explain the entire process so you guys understand what I'm doing here. In this case, I wanted to make sure that what I'm doing was this. To replicate that sound that I'm going for, you got to remember the recording phase. They record. So let's imagine I go walk to the studio. Okay, we're just walking into the studio. Okay, it's time to, you bring in your equipment. In this case, probably drum machines, keyboards, whatever, or in our case, computer. You bring in the computer, and then they're going to go track it out. So now I'm going to take each track, plug the computer in or whatever, and we're going to go to tape one at a time, or maybe they have a way where they can get all the instruments coming in, whatever, sync them all up, and then they start recording. Because we got to get it onto the tape. So that's what I did here, is I'm going into tracking tape. So, but I'm also mixing. So in a way, it's not exactly the same workflow, but you're getting the sound. And let me tell you why. Because what we're emulating is recording through the console and into the tape. Then from the tape, we're going to actually do the mix, right? So in this case, I mean, I guess I could have put the tape first. Maybe I should have put it first, now I think about it. And then the channel strip afterwards in the workflow. I can do that, like, check this out. Maybe I should have done that, right? So, there, I did it to all tracks. Huh. So, and then it'll go mixing into the yeah, that was the way I should have done it. Fucking shit. All right, so now I'm gonna have to like kind of fix things a little bit, but yeah. So I think the tape should be first in this case, because when we're getting the character of the console and going into tape, we're not doing any EQ or compression. Just going through. You're passing through and going into the tape machine. You could, but that's not what we're emulating here. And then we're gonna mix that right through the channel strip on the console, and then but because it was already printed to tape, that's what was committed to the tape. Then we're going to go into the console, mix it, do our EQ and compression moves, and go to master tape. That's the whole point, and that's why I have Brit console set to 2, because it's 2 times the character of the SSL 4000G console. So we're recording through this console and we're mixing on this console, and therefore we will have 2 impressions of this console. Now BX console, of course, is adding its own a little bit of vibe, but it's so subtle. If you've used this plugin by itself, it sounds pretty transparent, but there is a little bit. This adds a lot more character, and at this point, this is adding enough character, and everything is very, very, very authentic sounding to the real console. Then we're going into the SSL bus compressor, the G bus compressor, and then finally out to the tape machine again, which we're going to the master tape. And that's how we're doing it. So let me go and fix, because I realized I should have put the tape first. And then that, in order to emulate everything correctly, tape first, then into the channel strip. Because we're mixing from the tape that we recorded to. So I need to make sure that everything is, that the saturation on the tape is accurate, is not. I'm gonna make sure that it's all at the levels that I want it. So give me a second. There we go. That shouldn't have affected the levels, so that's why I didn't go back to the channel strips. I did check it because there's automatic gain compensation. So basically, it's the same gain going in. It's just we're controlling how much tape saturation, is being done to each track. And I want to make sure that I'm treating the tape as if I were really doing real tape. I want to make sure that I kind of want everything loud to overpower the tape hiss, and at the same time, I don't mind it going a little bit into the red because that's just going to add a little bit more good harmonics. So, but I don't want to slam it into the red. It's going to be way too warm, way too, gritty sounding. I want to keep it as clean as possible. And that is it. And actually, did you notice that when I put the tape before everything, now it sounded like a much more realistic mix than it did the other way around. So remember then, tape first on tracks, then the channel strip afterwards, because you're mixing from the tape. And you want the signal flow going into the tape and going through the console and stuff like that. And then we have the console 2 times, right? So because we recorded into the console and we mixed on the console, and we're going to the final tape machine, going through the bus compressor into the tape machine, the master tape, and the master tape is where the mix is going to be printed. And there you have it. And I don't know, but to my ears, that sounds pretty fucking analog. Like legit fucking analog. If I played that to somebody, they would hear that, and I strongly believe they would think that I gave them an analog mix. They would not think, oh, that's digital, whatever, I can tell. Fuck no, you can't tell. You can't tell the difference. And anybody dropping a comment right now and saying, I can tell, is a liar. Is a fucking liar. I've compared this. I know my own ears. And I compared this to shit that was actually mixed on the console through this process, that I was talking about. And it sounds the fucking same. The only difference would be, instruments that I chose. In this case, I did a little bit of my own production, and then I threw some loops together just to have something to mix for the video for you guys. And it sounded cool. Has this cool retro boom bap vibe or whatever. But this is also, you don't have to mix like this. You're only mixing like this if you're trying to recreate the sound of an era. I feel like this really captures that exact sound of the era. And in this case, we're talking early to mid 90s. Did they work on G series consoles? They did. Not many. Most were on E series consoles, but there were some G consoles during this time period, and I'm talking 1994. And that's kind of the sound I'm going for, because I love that sound quality. It really sounds good. I asked people on Facebook, what do you think is the best sonically hip-hop albums of all time? A lot reference Chronic 2001 because of how loud it was. I tend to think those are people who have bad ears, to be honest. I think Chronic 2001 sounds horrible, to be honest, because it's way too loud. I think the mixing was fine. I think the mastering was terrible. That's my opinion. I think Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg Doggy Style, was one of the best sounding. That was on SSL 4000E. 4052E, that's what Dre used for that album, and because that's what they had at Can-Am Studios at the time, and they're still there, by the way. CLA bought it, and Can-Am Studios is now Mix LA, and he owns it, and he's got the 4052E there, so it's still in the same studio as it always was. And Dr. Dre mixed on that console for the Death Row era stuff. But Aftermath era, I think he was on a G console later. So, and that's for 2001. But also, at that time, they weren't doing tape anymore. Everything was DAT. I mean, that's not really tape. It's like a floppy disk. It's just zeros and ones, and the DAT machine plays it back, takes the zeros and ones and plays it back. It's a digital machine. So there was no, tape saturation on a DAT tape. It's digital. So they were doing digital prints, digital mastering, and stuff like that became a thing around Chronic 2001 era. But at this time, you're talking early 90s, tape was still around. Tape machines, the 2-inch tape tracking tape, half-inch master tape. They were doing that process up in the early 90s. So if you want to have that sound, this is how you would do it. So I think I captured the sound of that era. If you want to know any other records that were mixed on a 4000G series console, like I said, I watched the old Bone Thug stuff, and they recorded and mixed on that console, on the SSL 4000G. Now I'm talking East 1999. There is another video where they are working on Resurrection, and they were on a Neve VR at that time. Crazy, huh? So the closest you can get to that plugin wise is the Brain BX Console N, because that's a VXS. It's the console that came after the VR, but you know, VXS S means just it's surround sound capable. So the VX came after the VR, but the VR and the VX sound very similar. Maybe the VX is a little better, a little cleaner, but the VR, very warm sounding console, and that's what Resurrection was done on. I'm assuming they recorded and mixed on that. So if you're trying to recreate that sound, that's what they used. That's what it looks like. It looks like a VR. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But definitely I know that East 1999 was recorded and mixed on an SSL 4000G. Now, you might see another video from Bone Thugs and Harmony where they recorded a song for the show, and the song was Everyday Thing. It's an everyday thing, you know that song? Well, anyway, that song, I don't know the console that they mixed on, but it sure looks very Neve-like. You know, I don't know what that console was per se. Maybe somebody who's seen the video can drop a comment and say, hey, look, I know what console that was. That was a blah, right? I don't know what console it was. But it looks a lot like a Neve to me, but I couldn't really tell. It doesn't look exactly like a Neve 80 series of any kind that I've ever seen, but it might have been a different kind of Neve, or maybe a in-between Neve, you know, between the 80 series and the Vs, the V series, you know, VR, VX. And before they went to the 88RS. So basically, like, maybe the last Neve before AMS Neves came around, you know, when AMS came around and bought the company. So I don't know what it was. Definitely wasn't a Focusrite console. Didn't look like a Focusrite to me. I can't tell what that was they recorded on that, and I'm assuming they also mixed on that, because you can see in the video, DJ Unique is like in the video talking to the engineer guy, some long haired dude, to, like, you know, crank up the bass or whatever on that album. And I remember that one sounded pretty good too. I love that sound. But I think more so the sound that we love from those records is really the hardware they use, like the gear, not necessarily the gear that was done during mixing, but the gear that they used to do the production. You know, that's really probably where a lot of the sound comes from. But, you know, this process also kind of gives you the vibe. And in that case, I think from you guys watching this and hearing this, it does sound very, very 90s vibey, right? Like, does it? I'm pretty sure it does. I'm going to have haters and trolls and shit just say whatever. You suck. This sounds digital. You're a dumb fuck. Fucking delete your channel. Go delete yourself. You know, something like that. And I'm going to go, whatever, man. Fuck all that. I always delete those stupid comments, man. Because there's just people, man, that are toxic, and they just want to talk shit and hate on everything you're fucking doing because they don't have jack shit going on in their lives because they're fucking bum-ass losers. It is what it is. You know, they hate that people are fucking doing something. But they love the videos. That's why they're there watching. You know what I'm saying? So, whatever. If they can't keep it cool and civil, I will boot their ass. I get things wrong a lot of the time, dude. So it's another thing. But at least I admit it. I'm not gonna double down on my bullshit if I got something wrong. But in this case, I really feel like this is the process that they've done based on the videos that I've watched. Because I wasn't there for those sessions. I was a kid at that time, preteen. I was too young to be in those studio sessions at the time. I started doing music in 1996, and I was 16 at that time, so do the math. So, you know, and I never been inside like a serious studio till about like 98 or so. Yeah, and I bought my own studio time, and that time I didn't know how to engineer or none of that stuff. And wanted to make a record. And if I remember, the studio was like in the Houston Heights area. And it was a cool studio, man. Like, hopefully the engineer's watching my video. Like, wait a second, I know you. You know, it was a cool studio, man. I think the dude had like a Soundcraft Ghost or something. Like that's like the console I'm thinking he had. It was definitely, he had no SSL. It's not that high end, you know. I mean, the dude was like charging like, I think like $100 or something, or $200 or something like that for like a 4-hour block. Like, he wasn't making a lot of money. But back then in the 90s, that was not bad, you know. And I was like, oh shit, you know, let's get the studio time. It's affordable, you know. And I think the guy had like a Soundcraft Ghost. He did have a 2-inch track tape machine though, which surprised me. I didn't even know. I was like, wow, there's a real tape machine. I've seen those. I just, you know, like, that's crazy. It was the only studio I've ever been to that ever had one of those. And I had my music on cassette tape, my beats on cassette tape. And we took them right off the cassette tape, put them on the reel-to-reel tape machine. And then from there, I noticed there's still noise. Oh no, it's gated. Oh, I'm tripping. Anyway, so let me check here. Double check here. Noise gate. Okay, it's on. All right. So anyway, tell you a little bit more about my story about why I chased this sound. I recorded at this studio. I think he had a Soundcraft Ghost, because that's the console it sure looks like. I didn't know the brand at the time, but I got from my memory that's what it looked like. It was a Soundcraft Ghost. And apparently it sounded really good though. Like, the Ghost preamps are really nice. If you want to know what an album sounds like that was mixed on one of those kind of medium grade consoles, you know, they weren't a high-end console, they weren't SSL, they weren't Neve, they weren't API, they weren't Harrison or anything like that. It was a medium grade console, like a Soundcraft, Tascam type of shit. I think it's above a Tascam, to be honest, above a Yamaha too. But I heard they had decent preamps for considering the price. So they had the Ghost pre's, and I heard those are not bad, you know, for that kind of console. And then he had like a legit tape machine, man, like a 2-inch. He said it was 24 track tape, so it was some big ass tape. And I was like, wow, you know, like, we're getting our shit on the tape machine. I remember how fucking good that sounded. My mind was fucking blown. Now, when it came to, he didn't have master tape though, so it went straight to into his computer at the time. And then I don't know what program he had on his computer. Sound Tools, I guess, right? The early version of Pro Tools. Maybe it was Pro Tools. I don't know. But we took the mix, right? So he recorded us the tape, and then he mixed us on his console. And then, like I said, it wasn't a very big one. That's what I think of Soundcraft. And then it went to the computer, the tower computer he had at the time. I couldn't believe how fucking good everything sounded. And I was thinking, damn, it sounded a lot better than a lot of shit that I heard, you know, coming out of a lot of studios at the time. And I'm going, dude, this guy's like an obscure dude in like the Houston Heights area that no one ever really goes to. And it was fire, dude. Like, the mix still to this day. And it's like, I don't have that CD. We burned a CD then at the time, and we also had a cassette tape of our session. And I don't have it anymore, but I remember the sound quality was second to none, man. Like, it was better than a lot of stuff that I heard at the time. The only records that I heard that were better than that were like actual, you know, big budget industry releases, you know. But anybody that was like independent at the time, dude, that mix killed them all. Like No Limit was doing like digital mixes with the Yamaha O2R on a lot of their shit, and I really felt like the sound that we got out of that analog studio shit on No Limit. Like, that's what I thought. I was like, dude, this shit's on No Limit sound all day. And because it sounded so much like, you know what it kind of reminded me of was like Tribe Called Quest's Low End Theory. That fucking, and the guy didn't have a Neve though. Like I said, I think most of that sound came from that tape machine. That was some fire fucking tape, dude. And I don't know what plugin emulates that particular tape, because I don't even think this Slate tape machine sounds like that particular tape. It sounded so good. And I've even used the Mix Analog Studer, which sounds decent. But that's just master tape. That's not a tracking tape. And we didn't have master tape on our session because it went straight to the computer. But we had the tracking tape, and the tracking tape was unfucking real. How good that fucking sounded. Guys, I went on a massive rant at the end. I always do this shit. That's why you guys like my videos, right? Because I don't do these fucking rants. But I couldn't believe... I'm still, to this day, I almost feel like there is a tape plugin out there that probably emulates that particular tape machine. I just don't know which one it was. You know, and what tape it was that he used. But it was a big motherfucker. That's all I know. He said it was 24-track tape. That's what I remember him telling me. And he said that if we want to spend more money, we could take that tape home with us, you know, to buy the tape. Otherwise, he was just gonna reuse it. And I was like, wow. And I was like, nah, because he goes, if you got to take it somewhere else to get mixed. That's what he was saying. I was like, nah, we'll have you mix it. Okay, you know. And get this, right? Here's another thing. Back then, I didn't know shit about mixing. And the engineer told me, don't tell him how to mix, right? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. I wanted to play for him an album of No Limit. That's what I was going for at the time. And I wanted him to... I said, can I play this for you so you can get an idea of, like, what we want? And he goes, no. Like, come on, how many rappers would be highly pissed at an engineer who tells them no, right? He says, no, I know what I'm doing. I know how to get your levels right. I said, all right, fine, whatever, we trust you. And he was right. He didn't have to listen to my reference, dude. It sounded fire. And he knew what the fuck he was doing. And from then on, you know, I couldn't really go to the studio that much. It cost a lot of money, man. And anyway, our album never came out anyway. But the experience is still there. And later on, now that I'm mixing in the box and I'm chasing an analog sound in the box, and people are like, that's impossible, you can't do it. Studio One, motherfucker, this shit sounded pretty fucking analog to me. But does it sound like that session, per se, that I had back in the day? Not exactly, but there are elements about this that sound better than what I did back then, right? And it's not because it's digital. It's emulating a certain analog that I didn't have access to at the time, and that is the console, right? SSL 4000G console. I think the tape that guy used is better than any plugin I have, but I still feel like the sound of the console was very accurately recreated through Studio One. And I owe it all to this bad boy. This gives you the console sound, which also means this. You don't have to use this channel strip to get that sound. You can mix with whatever you want. So if you like to use Pro Q3 and you like to be a visual mixer guy, you can do that and just run it through Brit console, right? And you're gonna have the console sound, which sounds better than a fucking regular digital mix. You want some kind of console vibe just to make it sound real. Like, that's the thing, it makes it sound realistic, right? That's the whole point. I still think that you should use a bus compressor, especially an SSL one. If you're going to use this one, use an SSL bus compressor. You don't have to use the Waves G-Bus compressor. You can use the Townhouse, or you can use Cytomic the Glue, or you can use an SSL native bus compressor. Pick the one that you like the best and use that one on your master bus. That goes on your master bus insert right here. You can choose to use tape machines or not. Me, for this particular track, I want tape machine, and also I wanted 2x character on the console. If it were, let's say, I gotta do something more modern, then we're just gonna go through the console, into the bus compressor, no tape, no nothing, and one time through the console. So it'd be like as if you brought in your computer and we tracked, or brought in your Pro Tools session, right? But we're not doing Pro Tools because fuck Pro Tools, right? We're using Studio One. You brought in your Studio One session, and we're just going to mix on the console, and then we're going to go right back, loop back into the computer and print that mix and call it a day, right? That's basically the signal flow that we would be emulating just by doing that, and therefore then you could just use the channel strips, the bus compressor, and Brit console, and boom, you're done. Or if you don't want to use the channel strips, you can use whatever plugins you like to do specific things, but just run it through Brit console for your summing, basically for your channel saturations and whatnot, and crosstalk, and then the summing, and then glue it with the bus compressor and call it a day. So that's how you do it. That's the explanation. You also got a little bit of my life history, so there's that. I can't think of anything else to talk about. You guys get to hear the mix. It sounds fire. And I'm on Studio One. Now, I'm telling you right now, Studio One has been my favorite. But I do really, really, really like Harrison too. I do. And I'm not saying that it's a bad software. I think it's wonderful. It sounds good too. It's beautiful, but Harrison vibe does not work for every mix for me. I like SSL vibe because that is what it is, man. Dude, Dr. Dre, man. That's why, Dr. Dre. Right? So there you go. If Dr. Dre was using Harrison's and I fell in love with his music, then it would have been Harrison all the way. But Dr. Dre is the reason why we do SSL in the box. And I want a 4,000, not a 9,000. So there you have it. It's your boy Vigilante Styles, man. If you guys enjoy my videos, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Why do I tell you guys that shit at the end of the video? Because I'm not one of these dicks who do that at the very beginning, right? That go, before I start doing what you came here to see, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, whatever, share my video, blah, 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 this other bullshit. I tell you guys at the very end to do that shit. Because you guys came to watch the video, maybe hear some of my rants, I'm sure, and of course get some techniques. This is the new technique here if you're trying to get that 90s sound, and early to mid 90s sound. Late 90s, I told you how to do that. We're going digital at that point, but they may have done tracking tape. No, they had ADAT tapes too for recording. So I guess later on it would have been just the console and DAT tapes. I don't know if they went to master tape afterwards and then sent that to mastering. They could have done that. Maybe that's something they did. They may have continued to keep the master tape machine, but I believe it was like ADATs by then. So it's basically digital. There's, emulate ADAT. It's just digital. So if you want that late 90s sound, you're probably just going to use the console only. But then your mastering is not going to be digital usually. It's going to be an analog master. So now you have to figure out an analog mastering chain if you want that sound. Here, though, I think you can get away with a digital master after doing, because there's plenty of analog mojo on this. Digital master, Ozone, Master Assistant, whatever. And then fine tune some things and call it a day, and you have your master. If you're trying to get a late 90s sound, they could have done it that way too. I don't know. I really don't know the mastering process of that time, but I'm assuming they used a lot of outboard gear, and they probably did in the early 90s too. I'm just saying you can get away with a digital master because there's plenty analog vibe already by then. But if you want the true analog sound, you're probably going to have to figure out an analog style mastering chain. And that's where you're going to be using plugins like, Bax EQ, Dangerous Bax EQ, probably Shadow Hills mastering compressor, and a whole host of other shit to get you a analog sounding master. I have those plugins because I thought to myself I was going to do some mastering. I don't know, and then I just use Ozone, is what it is. Because mastering and mixing are two different arts. So it's like, I know the art of mixing. The art of mastering is, I know what I'm trying to do. Get things loud and make sure the EQ, the tonal balance is controlled, FYI. But otherwise, other little tricks and tips that they do with whatever, I don't know. I really don't know. I used Masterdesk for a while. I do have it. You can see that in my list. I use Masterdesk. That sounds cool. I can't say that it sounds analog, but it sounds cool. It's got its own vibe. But overall, I think you probably just need to figure out a mastering chain. I think mastering chain is probably a hybrid situation nowadays where they're going to use some analog and they're going to use some digital. So for you, since you're in the box, probably use some analog emulations of those gears, of that gear, excuse me, and then probably Ozone is in the mix somewhere. I'm pretty sure on most mastering engineers shit they are using Ozone, they're just not using Master Assistant. They're probably using like the stereo widener and the maximizer, I'm sure, whatever, EQ and other stuff, probably Pro Q3 and stuff, so they can have more EQ points to mess around with. Adding more saturation I don't think is too terribly necessary. Probably maybe tape again. I think maybe tape again. I saw an Abbey Road mastering thing where they still went to tape. Unless they don't do that if they think it sounds analog, right? Because I think they listen to the music before they decide what the chain's going to be about. So anyway, God, I'm just rambling forever. It's your boy Vigilante Styles, man. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I am out. Peace. Till we meet again. Peace.